have you guys watched any of the Alex Jones defamation trial or no?
I saw one clip and I tried to listen to some of it. Yeah.
I saw that one clip. I'm assuming everyone saw with the your lawyer gave us all the phone data by accident.
Yes. Do you guys have a position on, what you think is the ideal outcome for the trial? What do you think, Adam?
This is an interesting question because so much of our show is like Sitch and I talking through these things, and I haven't really thought much about the Alex Jones controversy. I do know that there is a lot of difficulty here with discerning truth in the current environment, and I know a lot of people. We had the Amazing Atheist on our show a couple weeks ago, and he has a position where he doesn't want to let any untruths be broadcast into the world, and I have some sympathy for that position, but I don't necessarily know how we discern what truth is. It seems like a big part of our political life is trying to understand what is true in the world. So I'm uncomfortable with the situation. I mean, obviously in the Sandy Hook situation, it's crystal clear. Like, we know what the truth was, and you kind of have Alex Jones taking a totally self-serving position. But in the broader context of the debate, it is a tough debate that I think we need to have more often.
What do you think, Sitch?
Give a clear answer, Adam. Look at that. You just didn't give any answer. That was a nothing answer.
What
does Alex Jones get sued? Does he pay the families all this money, or is it free speech?
Clearly Alex Jones should get sued and should pay they're haggling over the amount of money now. Like, he's already lost the case, correct? And so we know, and even the judge is admonishing him for, lying in court, basically saying things like he cooperated with Discovery, which he didn't cooperate with Discovery. So yeah, I'm up to speed on that stuff. But the more interesting question for me is the wider debate about, truth in media, right? Like, Biden tried to nominate like a truth czar, right? Who was obviously a partisan hack, who I don't believe has any ability to discern what is true and what is not. Putting her in a position of power is ridiculous. I mean, that is the substantive debate here, is it not? This is why the Alex Jones thing is interesting, correct? Because there are people that do believe Alex Jones, still believe what Alex Jones is saying is true, that's the scary part.
Right. Well, I'll be honest, I don't know super a lot of the facts, Kyle. So I don't know, is the claim that
you're gonna punt? You're not gonna answer now?
No, I'm gonna answer. Listen, I'm gonna answer.
This is our show facts. All the way, right?
I'm just asking for some clarification here. Is the claim that Alex Jones was just horribly negligent, or is the claim that he knew that he was, BSing with the claims he was making?
So here's the case breakdown as far as I understand it. I've been watching it like a hawk because I'm fascinated by it. But so this was not a criminal trial. It was a civil case.
Right.
It's a civil.
Sure.
Which, just to explain for the audience, there's a very big difference there, because the standard of evidence is actually much lower in a civil case than it is in a criminal case. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the preponderance of the evidence, which is basically, if it's better than a 50% chance that there were some damages done here, then okay, pay out effectively. So I don't think they would have been, and I've gotten criticism from my left over this, but I was against the Alex Jones deplatforming, and I was against, I don't think he would have been found guilty in a criminal trial, to be honest with you, because the bar for defamation, I think, is rightly so high that you need to prove material damages, and you have to prove a direct causation. And it was just too many layers removed to really connect the dots all the way back to Alex Jones. And I think in a court of law, it really wouldn't have gone well. In this case in particular, he was found guilty of defamation, but he's found what's called guilty by default. So the whole reason he was found guilty was not on necessarily the substance of the trial. It was because he didn't cooperate with the court and provide all the documents that he was legally required to provide. And so, yeah, he was found guilty for that reason. Hilarious. And then now the only conversation is, how much are you going to have to pay out? And the defense is asking for just $1, and the plaintiff's attorneys are asking for $150 million. So that's the background of the case.
Ouch. I mean, I'm assuming he doesn't have $150 million, but
Well, that's another thing because he's claiming that he doesn't have any money. He's claiming he's bankrupt, and the judge
that's
admonished him
probably not
for
true.
That's
But,
the
definitely not
judge
true. Yeah,
admonished
we
him
have some
for
facts on that. We
right.
have. I mean,
the judge.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
The judge admonished him for claiming that he was bankrupt in court because she's like, you just filed for bankruptcy, okay? That hasn't been determined whether or not that's true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And from my reading of
okay.
Go ahead, Sitch.
Well, I was just saying, well, I'll answer the question because I
Mhm.
haven't answered it so far. Let's see. How can we answer this question? Because like with the Sandy Hook thing, to me, it's so horrifyingly obvious
Yes.
that it wasn't some, conspiracy theory, it wasn't a false flag. I mean, to me, it's just so like insanely obvious that really happened. But at the same token, I guess I'm not sure I mean, I still think people should be able to make crazy claims on the internet as long as as long as the person doesn't know that they're lying. Generally, that's usually where my cutoff is. I guess the next question would be, well, how horribly negligent does someone have to be, especially someone with a large audience? Like, how much do they have to just screw up and be lazy or be stupid in their thinking that it causes harm, that it's worthwhile? So I don't know, maybe I can take the easy out, which is to say that criminally, he shouldn't be charged, but civilly, it's fine for him to get sued by these families because he did cause them, presumably, all this emotional damage by having them, or even, be afraid, because if he's out there saying that as a false flag, he's doing all this stuff, and he's not checking any of this information. It'd be very easy to check to find out that these people really died and that these were real people. And if this leads to family members who've lost their children, receiving death threats and people stalking them, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe it is just he's so negligent for something that was so easy to check on. So he should be held responsible.
Can we talk about like the knowingly portion of this for a second? Because
Sure, yeah.
I think with defamation, I mean, I'm under the impression like a lot more harm is done to the world through stupidity than malice.
Mm-hmm.
And just sometimes I think of it kind of like drunk driving. Like you have a giant platform. It seems like you have some duty to at least investigate the claims that you're making. And if you're not going to do that, how is it any different than some drunk getting in the car and slamming into a family when these people put like blatant untruths into the world? Even if they're doing it like innocently because they haven't checked.
Well, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I think the problem is that nowadays it seems like so much of the fights are over what is true and the facts of the case rather than like your opinion of the facts. And I would assume even with Sandy Hook, you could point to all this, BS fake news facts that were propping up about it being a false flag or whatever exactly the conspiracy charge was. So they could say, oh, I was looking into it. Look, here's my mountain of facts. I mean, we see this with almost whenever there's a contentious issue, it's always, whose set of facts do you believe in?
Well, sooner or later that we have to go down that road. We have to go down like you should be able to discern truth to some level, especially if you're a member of the media where you're shaping public perception. I feel like we have to go down that road. We have to say, listen, you should have known this is the truth. You can't just throw up your hands and say, oh,
Right.
I had my set of facts and you had your set of facts. And
so,
of course, mine were all BS. But
so let me chime in here because what Sitch said about intent, I think, is actually spot on. I do think intent matters. It might even be the thing that matters the most, which is why I don't think he really could have been got on this criminally. Like, I don't think he would have been able to get jail time on this criminally because there's just too many dots to connect to the actions of the insane individuals who actually committed the crimes and harassed the people and whatnot. But the argument that's made by the plaintiff's attorneys is interesting because they make the point. There was some poll that came out that showed like 24% of the population says that Sandy Hook was either definitely or possibly faked, and that Alex Jones was like the only media outlet of any size whatsoever that was like ruthlessly pushing that agenda. So, you know, there is a connection there. There's no doubt about it. But if you can't get him criminally, I kind of agree with Sitch that like civilly, it's understandable. But at the same time, like, I don't know if you guys remember this because I think you're younger than I am, but there was this big scandal because Bill O'Reilly back in the day.
We are younger than
don't laugh, Sitch. Just smile.
Bill O'Reilly back in the day, very famously kept going after this abortion doctor who did late-term abortions, and his name was George Tiller, and he would keep calling him Tiller the baby killer, like day in and day out, day in and day out.
The baby killer,
and then somebody murdered George Tiller. And so I actually think that's even more egregious than the Alex Jones one, because in the Alex Jones one, nobody got killed. Somebody actually got murdered because of what Bill O'Reilly said. So again, that's why I think criminally it's actually, I think, a pretty simple question, even though it's an unpopular answer, which is there's nothing you can do criminally. There's just not enough there. You know, he never said the name, or he said the name. Alex may have personally never said the names of any of those people on air. So the idea of like, oh, he doxed them, or he didn't do it. There was one time Owen Schroyer, one of the other hosts, mentioned one of their names, and it was like in passing or whatever. So again, the lines aren't clear enough to decide it criminally, but in terms of civilly, I mean, my guess is they're going to award at least $50 million to these plaintiffs because they have been harassed ruthlessly, and they do. I think the jury is convinced of the connection back to Alex Jones, and Alex has perjured himself on the stand, and he just comes across like an unhinged maniac. And honestly, I think that's going to factor into their ruling, even if it's not supposed to.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he just comes across as an unhinged maniac. I think he is an unhinged maniac.
True.
But
True.
Part of my difficulty is that, like, with this individual case, to me, very obviously, I think Alex Jones should pay for this individual case. My difficulty is in trying to construct like a more universal framework for how cases like this will be determined in the future. And I can't really figure out exactly how to do that.
That's exactly right, Sitch. And that's exactly what I struggle with too.
Need to?
Yeah.
I think it's definitionally it happens when you're talking about the law, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
That's the issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, but that's why I always say criminally, you can't really get them. But civilly, there's an open question. But you just hope that whatever precedent is set is not used to stifle speech in any sort of irrational way, which is a real fear in today's climate, because you guys talk about it all the time. I mean, the speech police are everywhere. So, that could be a problem. Yeah. So
stifling speech is the other side of that equation. Do you think people should be responsible for their own stupidity? Like I have so much difficulty with it because like so much harm is done just by stupidity that you really can't look at people and say this is an intentional act, but it is causing a lot of damage. You're
using the word stupidity, which I'm not sure is accurate, because like using your drunk driving example, if someone gets, everyone knows that if you drink and drive, like it's been so hammered into the consciousness of, the minds of Americans, that drinking and driving, when you're drunk, it impairs your ability to react quickly, and you're going to make poor decisions, and you're going to be a more dangerous driver. Like everyone's kind of aware of this fact.
Yes.
And so if you decide to drink and drive, you're kind of entering the situation with that knowledge. Now you could try to convince yourself that you're a fine driver, you're not really drunk or whatever, but that's all besides the point. When you have someone like, Alex Jones or someone on the news who's kind of pushing something that turns out not to be true, I'm assuming that in most cases, it's not like a question of that kind of level of negligence. Like they know that they're playing fast and loose. It's more a question of these are people that kind of already buy into a worldview. They already buy into a set of ideological biases. And so they're going to sort of automatically look for information that confirms that bias.
Right.
And to me, it's kind of, I agree with you. Like, I want there to be a framework, a way to sort of hold people accountable for, horribly stupid fake news that they peddle. But since they're operating under like the same mental framework that everyone else is operating under, and how they, kind of look for information.
I don't disagree, but I feel like in the context of the drunk driving situation, you're just saying, well, people like to drink and they have to get home. Like sooner or later, you have to start hammering into the culture the ramifications of spreading misinformation, even if it's done ignorantly.
Right. Well,
Like
I mean,
otherwise you're never
mhm,
going to avoid this situation, and people are always going to do it inadvertently, accidentally, and then use that as a defense.
right. It would be nice. It would be wonderful if, as a society, we could create like a cultural defense against, misinformation where people actually did feel guilty for spreading fake news. I don't see that that's possible because, Alex Jones is kind of like the edge case. Most of the misinformation is far more, left right divided. It's far more close
Sure.
to the
Yes.
center,
Right.
and people don't
And
really agree what
also
the misinformation ever
it,
even is.
yeah, also the truth is harder to discern in many cases. And I obviously concede that. Like in
Hmm.
certain situations, I mean, we're actively trying to discover the truth. But I'm only really talking about the extreme situations where, this is obviously misinformation. I mean, like, I think, I
Well,
mean, go ahead.
here's a this is going to be a contentious example. I mean, if we're talking about misinformation that's caused things in our society, what about the fine people hoax, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
or January 6th. I mean, it's the same
right,
situation. Yeah.
but it is. But if we want to go to the right wing perspective here, Joe Biden's opening bid, his first campaign ad was throwing the Donald Trump said that the people in Charlottesville were fine people,
Yeah.
which everyone neglects, not everyone, but a lot of people neglect the fact that if you actually watch the full questioning, like a couple seconds after that fine people line, he specifies that he's not talking about the Nazis or anything like that when he said he was talking about fine people, and yet that's a huge piece of misinformation that you could easily go look on, and maybe Joe Biden won the presidency because of that.
Yeah, and
Well,
not
this
only
is
that, it's
why
embedded in the culture. It's like in like dozens of books. Like,
Right.
Well, this is
yeah,
why it comes back to the point that you made earlier in the conversation you had with TJ, where you were having the broader debate about this notion of a ministry of truth, and is that even possible? And this is something TJ and I have gone back and forth on previously, and my answer to that is
oh,
a
interesting.
very, very firm no. A ministry of truth is not at all
Mm-hmm.
possible, because what happens in that scenario is you introduce the biases of the whoever you choose to be the ministry of truth, and you're going to have the same people in mainstream media who got the Jussie Smollett thing dead wrong, who got the Russiagate thing dead wrong, who got facts
Mm-hmm.
about the war in Syria wrong, who got WMDs in Iraq wrong. Those are going to be the same people who would be propped up to be the arbiters of what is correct and what is false. And nobody in their right mind should believe them. I mean, that's not to absolve all of independent media, new media, and alternative media of the incorrect things that are regularly spewed on that front, because there are incorrect things. But certainly there's way more cultural power and way more consequential lies, and or maybe lies isn't even the right word, just things that aren't true that come from mainstream media. So I don't think it's possible to create a ministry of truth. I think that it's literally unworkable, is my take on it.
Yeah, I would never consider creating some institution that is like a ministry of truth. If anything, the laws around defamation just need some tweaking. But that might be unfeasible too, because then you're just turning the legal system into the check instead of
Yeah,
the
I mean,
so-called ministry of truth.
but you
So
you made a good point
you would
before, though,
have better
Adam.
luck though with you would have better luck though with a jury of your peers than some partisan institution though.
Yeah, I think you made a great point before, though, about the very extreme cases, which currently is like, that's kind of how our current system is set up, right? Like when people talk about the First Amendment, we have, our First Amendment is very lenient when it comes to freedom of speech, as it should be. But there are, you still can't
Yes.
do defamation, you still can't do libel, you still can't do slander, and the bar is very high to prove those things, which I think is correct. But there still are
Mm-hmm.
examples of like, no, that actually is defamation, and you're not allowed to say that shit. So I think we actually kind of
Yeah.
walked the balance properly when it comes to our Constitution, and more importantly, the interpretation of our Constitution in case law throughout U.S. history.
Well, we're doing our best, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right, guys, this is a teaser clip from my podcast with Sitch and Adam of the Sitch and Adam Show. They generally describe themselves as enlightened centrists, so it was interesting. There were many points of agreement, but also points of disagreement and debate. We talked about Jordan Peterson, the Alex Jones defamation trial, January 6th, MMT, which is modern monetary theory, which is, like sort of a deep economic conversation. And it was great. So please consider supporting the show. $5 a month gets you the video of every podcast, and it gets it to you a day early. Everybody else, you could sign up on Substack for free also, and that gets you the audio podcast. As soon as it drops, it gets emailed to you, and you can listen for free that way. But we don't take any ad money for the show, so please consider donating. It's you guys that keep us going with the $5 a month. So we love you guys very much. We'll talk to you soon. Peace. If you want to see me and Krystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Krystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.